again, this is Nicole. This is the other video, as promised, to talk to you about how to write an incident report. So in our previous video, I showed you how to submit the incident report, and here I'm going to give you a couple of IR examples of what to be sure to include and what those look like when I receive them. So first, we're going to start with this screen. This discusses some of the things that I want you to consider when you're writing an incident report. First, we need you to know that you should write the facts and only the facts. Like I mentioned in my previous video, if you recall, we don't know who's going to be reading this report, so we don't want to fill it with opinions. Maybe if there's a particular student that you don't like, or maybe they were really rude to you, don't exaggerate what they say. Don't put your opinion in there. You know, you're not a medical professional, so try not to add any additional information like, I think this student is crazy. You know, if you can't offer an actual clinical diagnosis, don't use words like that. So just state the facts. So start with that. Use the date, time, and specific location. If you remember earlier, I told you to put the residence hall room number. Don't forget the suite number. Don't forget the specific information so we know really how to locate this student. It's possible that maybe you don't know their name, or you misspell it, or you don't know their PID. If we have that additional information like a room number, that can help us narrow things down. So be sure and be as specific as possible when writing out that information. Do put the date and time. If you're not 100% sure, but you know it was close to 10 p.m., you can say at approximately 10 p.m. Don't say Friday night, because Friday night could span from 5 p.m. until 2 o'clock in the morning. We don't know. So try to be as specific as possible the best you can. Put the names, job titles, and departments of people who are involved. You know, if there's a sheriff deputy that shows up, be sure and put their name, get that information because we may need to follow up with them. Put your name and job title. I may not know all of you, so when I'm reading this report, if you say desk assistant John Doe was at the desk at 2 o'clock in the morning, etc., then I'll know. If you just say John Doe was at the desk, I may say, who is John Doe and why was he at the desk? So be sure and put your own title and the titles of other people. If, for example, pro staff shows up, you'll want to identify pro staff Amanda showed up at whatever time Amanda showed up. Be sure and tell me who these people are so that I know who we're talking about. Put the names and accounts of witnesses. Be sure and state so-and-so is a witness. That way I don't think that that student is the person who allegedly created the offense, right? So if you say witnesses included student A, student B, student C, I will know they were witnesses and they weren't actually involved, so they won't get a charge letter. It has happened in the past where there were just students listed out. All of those students got a letter from me, and some of them freaked out because they were like, I was just a bystander, I wasn't even involved in this, and their name should have probably never even been in the report, or they should have been more specifically listed as a witness. So talk to me about the events leading up to this. How did the student enter the building? How did you end up in the room? Tell me why you were in that place and during that time. Tell me, is there another event? Was it snowing? Was it a football game? Was it homecoming? All of these details help make a difference. So if you tell me that it was a snowy day and you walked into a student's room and you smelled marijuana and their windows were wide open, that is obviously going to trigger us to say, okay, well, it's possible that they were smoking marijuana because why else would you have your windows open if it's snowing outside, right? So all of those little details help us piece together the puzzle of what we're trying to figure out. So tell me what happened at the time of the incident. You walked in. What did you see? What did you hear? A lot of times students will leave out these fine details, and it's really important for you to add them. So you can say, I heard noise as I was approaching the door of room 123 in Greenhorn. As I got closer, I could hear what sounded like glass bottles clanging. I knocked on the door 3 times. I announced myself. All of these information pieces are very important, so be sure to include those in your incident. Environmental conditions, again, if there's smoke, if there's noise, how many people did you see? Don't just say there were a lot of people. Tell me there were approximately 5 people or approximately 25 people. What seems like a lot of people to you may not seem like a lot of people to me. So be as specific as possible. If you say there were 100 liquor bottles in the room, but you take a picture and there are only 3, please don't exaggerate. Remember, we're just stating the facts. So be as specific as possible. Take photos in that regard so that we can kind of piece those things together. There have been a lot of times where students go in the room and they're like, I don't know, there was just liquor in the room. Okay, was there a bottle of beer? Was there a case of beer? All of these things make a difference, right? So be sure and take photos so we know what you're talking about. Were there any injuries? Was someone hurt? Did you have to call the ambulance like I alluded to in my previous video? Be sure and tell me, did the sheriff's department show up? Did the ambulance show up? Who else was involved? Did the fire department come? If so, when? What time? Who was there? Why were they there? What did they do? What did they tell you to do? All of that information is going to be super important. Be sure and tell us if there's anything damaged, broken, or out of place. If a student punches a hole in the wall, tell me where the hole is. Tell me the size of the hole. Tell me if it looks like they did it with their fist. Did they kick it? Did they slam their head into a wall? We don't know. So be sure and take pictures and list any kind of damages. This happens a lot with screens, and students will pop off their screens to go in and out the windows. So if you see something like damage to a screen on a window, be sure and let us know, because then that student will get charged and we can replace that broken screen. So determine again, what led up to the event. Why were you there? What was happening? Did you see a student being carried into the building by 3 other students? Was the student stumbling in on their own? All of those things, as you can imagine, can show us the progression of the incident. So it's really important that you list all of that. Any kind of other incidents, were the students being loud? Were they yelling? Were they whispering? Anything like that. Tell me what happened afterward. The sheriff showed up and then they left, and then what? A lot of times students will say pro staff showed up and then they end the report there. I need you to tell me what exactly happened to complete the entire process. So sheriff's deputies showed up at 10 p.m. They left the scene at midnight. The person writing the report, I, the RA, so-and-so, left the incident at midnight and we told the residents to go to bed. Any of that information is super helpful. Tell me just the facts. Don't tell students what you think might happen. One of the big things I see students do is say, oh, it's okay, Nicole will probably just give you a warning, you're okay. Don't tell students that, because then they come to see me and maybe it's their 3rd violation and you didn't know that, and now they're being suspended when you told them they were just going to get a warning. So be mindful of what you say to students. Don't say what you think is a violation. Just tell me the facts. Don't tell me what you've seen in the past. Don't tell the students things that you think I'm going to do, because that's just not fair to them, because you honestly don't know. And then, recommend what you think needs to happen next. If you see that there's damage, say, I would recommend that a work order be entered so that this piece can be fixed or repaired. Maybe you would recommend that the student meets with their RA to discuss further. Maybe you would recommend that I meet with the RA so I can get a clearer picture of the details. All of this information is super helpful, but just be careful. Remember, you're not recommending that the student goes to the counseling center because you think that they have a mental health issue. That's not your job to assess, right? This part is just to recommend what you think we need to do to follow up. Otherwise, we can use our own professional judgment to figure out if a student needs counseling, right? So on the report, you want to be as specific as possible. Remember, these are the dates, the times. Tell me who you are. You're the resident of Culebra Hall. You heard loud noise. Tell me which room, which side, suite A, suite B. Who is your backup RA? This is who they are. Remember to quote the students exactly what they said. If a student cusses at you and uses foul language, please quote them as saying that. We're all adults here. You can write a cuss word in a report. Just remember to quote that, because you're saying what they said. If you don't really remember what they said, you can say, student cursed at me. I don't remember exactly the language that was used, but it was very offensive. That's totally fine. But don't say the student said, kiss my ass, when the student actually said, like, I'm going to F you up. Like, those are 2 completely different things. So if you can't really remember exactly what the student said, do not quote something that they did not say, okay? Talk to me about, when things happened, who arrived, what time, how long were they there. This helps us to know. So if every time you call in an incident and the sheriff's office takes over an hour to get there and you put that in your report, that's something that we can address with them, and we can say, well, this person waited 60 minutes to respond to this report, and then we can follow up on that. If it's a very short response, you can put that in there as well. Tell me what you saw. Remember, be specific. 3 bottles of Busch Light beer, 4 red Solo cups, and then attach a photo. So that way we know if there's one person in the room and there's 3 bottles of beer, 4 red Solo cups, that's going to tell us there probably used to be other people in that room. Like maybe there was a party, maybe people ran when you knocked on the door. We don't know. So be sure and list all of this pertinent information because it's really important. Okay? Also, tell me who else was there, identify them. Remember, like I said before, if they were a non student, you can put their driver's license. If you know their PID, you can put their PID. A lot of times, people will misspell a student's name or put the wrong name in. Like maybe you assumed it was the roommate who lives in the room, but it really wasn't that person. So be sure and ask for their IDs and write that PID in there so you know exactly who you're talking to. Remember, tell me who the deputy was that responded. Names are very important. Remember, quote people if they were asking questions, what they did. If the students were compliant or not is important, because if the students aren't compliant and they don't do what you ask them to do, they get an extra charge for that. So if the students were compliant and you're like, they were really friendly, they did what I asked them to do, put that in your report because it does make a difference. If you see any kind of canisters or bottles and you're not sure what it is, just take a picture of it. If the students get ticketed, you can tell us that. That's important. Make sure, to tell us exactly. So your RA backup person stayed outside to make sure nobody ran. That's good. And then say, it's my recommendation that this be forwarded to conduct staff. That's totally fine. So things that you shouldn't do, your report should never be this long. If your report is only one paragraph, you are not writing an incident report. You are just being lazy and writing a couple sentences. If your report, you see how long this is, it's a couple pages, and I know that's a lot, but it's really important. Now, if you find a beer can in the hallway, you can say an empty Busch Light beer can was located in the lobby of Calibra. The person who it belonged to is unknown. That's fine. But if you're actually reporting to an incident, it should be much longer than this. Okay? So just remember, paint a picture, state the facts, don't make guesses. If you assume a student is intoxicated, maybe they weren't. What I need you to tell me is the student was swaying back and forth, the student was slurring their words, their eyes were bloodshot. I don't expect you to know all of that if you don't know it, so don't feel like you have to put it in there. That's what law enforcement is called for. But don't say, yeah, I'm pretty sure the student was drunk, when you absolutely have no idea if they really were or not. So don't make guesses. Make sure that you know this report could determine whether or not a student gets kicked out of school, right? And that's going to impact their entire future. So don't make guesses, don't make things up, don't over exaggerate, don't under exaggerate. Just make sure that you give me the facts, give this your full attention, write a thorough report, make sure we know what's going on because this does impact somebody's future. Be sure and complete your report 24 hours after the incident. The longer you wait, the more you start to lose information. Use your phone to take photos and notes. Ask questions. Remember to ask us if you're not sure. Put more in the report than less. If you're like, I'm not sure if I should say this or not, put it in there. And then don't feel bad if I respond to you and say, hey, next time you don't need to add this information. Okay? It's training, you're learning, and that's okay. So don't feel like you're going to get in trouble if you write a bad report. I'm just going to email you and say, hey, next time it would be really helpful if you put this additional information in your report. Okay? You're going to mess this up. It's not a big deal. But take it kind of like you're in a class, right? And then I give you feedback, you learn, you write better the next time, and then we just go forward. So more information is important. I will correct you, or your supervisor will correct you if you make a mistake, but you're not going to get fired because you wrote a bad report. You might get in trouble if you continuously write bad reports. So all I ask is that you try to do your best and improve as you go along. So also, I just want to say thank you. This stuff is really important. We couldn't do this job without you. You're really protecting the safety of students on campus. Our job is to make sure students get educated. So if they're drinking or they're smoking marijuana, we want to have a conversation with them about doing that while they're on campus before they go into an apartment off campus and they end up going to jail or getting arrested because of their illegal behavior. So really all this is about is educating students. You're not getting anyone in trouble. So don't go into that mindset. Just remember that this is to help students learn. We're all here to learn. Even I learn as a pro staff member every day, and it's important that we all do that together. So lastly, I just want to show you what the IR looks like when I receive it. So remember that form that I showed you how to fill out in the last video? This is what it looks like on the back end, and this is why it's really important to fill this out. So this is the information that you fill out. you tell me all the information, where it was, etc. This is an actual report, so I did black out some of the information just so you know. These are the names of the students. These are the PIDs of the students. And then this is the incident report. So you can see this person is a pro staff member, and they state on Friday, August 31st, professional staff, their name, received a call at specific time. Resident assistant called so-and-so during their rounds because they heard loud music, etc. So you can say, you know, I arrived around 18 minutes later. I could hear rustling in the room. I knocked and announced myself. That's important because that's part of our policy. You can say you could smell alcohol. You heard someone crying. You quote the resident. Be specific. The student was crawling into her bed. She was distraught. The student was crying, obviously, saying she missed her boyfriend, etc. So, as you can tell, this is a pretty lengthy report. This person was very specific. They said there were 2 liters of vodka. They named the vodka and they attached a photo. That's perfect. If the sheriff showed up, the deputy showed up and began breathalyzing students, that's important because then we'll know what their blood alcohol level was. It was a 0.06. That tells me that the student hadn't drank a whole lot, but they were nearing the level too high to be able to drive, so that's important to know. They talk about, you know, being athletes. They were all issued tickets by the deputy. They had made a phone call. They remained in the room, and then the incident ended around 1 a.m. So then we know this incident occurred at 11 p.m. and lasted until 1 a.m. We can infer some information from that, so all of those timestamps are super important. Again, the person here posted, you know, the sheriff's office showed up. They are residents, life and housing. They didn't have any additional background information. They didn't need anyone else informed. And then this is their attachment of their pictures. And then this says, this report went to me, the director of student conduct. And then that is the entire report. So what happens is I print this out and I show it to the student and I have them read it. And I say, tell me what information you know about this. Okay. So as you can imagine, if I hand this to a student and say, read this, and you wrote something in there, you know, maybe you said, I don't like this resident, or this resident's really ugly and stupid, which I would hope you would never say about another person. But imagine me handing the report that you wrote to a resident and allowing them to read it and know what you wrote. So keep that in the back of your mind when you're writing these reports that, again, we don't know who's reading them, and it could be the person that you're writing about. So please be kind, be compassionate. We don't know what this student is going through and why they felt the need to get intoxicated to this point on this day. So just be mindful of the information that you put in the report. And then that's how you write an IR. Again, you can call me, you can email me, you can ask questions to your supervisor. All of us are here. We're happy to help. So again, thank you so much for doing this. And if you have any questions, just let us know.